Year of Glad. I'm seated in an office surrounded by heads and bodies. My posture is consciously congruent to the shape of my hard chair. This is a cold room in university administration. Wood-walled, Remington hung, double-windowed against the November heat. Insulated from administrative sounds by the reception area outside, at which Uncle Charles, Mr. DeLint, and I were lately received. I am here. 3 faces resolve into place above summer-weight sports coats and half-windsors, across a polished pine conference table, shiny with the spidered light of an Arizona noon. These are 3 deans of admissions, academic affairs, athletic affairs. I do not know which face belongs to whom. I believe I appear neutral, maybe even pleasant, though I've been coached to err on the side of neutrality and not attempt what would feel to me like a pleasant expression or smile. I have committed to crossing my legs, I hope, carefully, ankle on knee, hands together on the lap of my slacks, my fingers matted into a mirrored series of what manifests to me as the letter X. The interview room's other personnel include the university's director of composition, its varsity tennis coach, and Academy Prorector Mr. A.D. Lint. CT is beside me. The others sit, stand, and stand respectively. At the periphery of my focus, the tennis coach jingles pocket change. There is something vaguely digestive about the room's odor. The high-traction sole of my complimentary Nike sneaker runs parallel to the wobbling loafer of my mother's half-brother, here in his capacity as headmaster, sitting in the chair to what I hope is my immediate right, also facing deans. The dean at left, a lean, yellowish man whose thick smile nevertheless has the impermanent quality of something stamped into uncooperative material, is a personality type I've come lately to appreciate. The type who delays need of any response from me by relating my side of the story for me to me. Passed a packet of computer sheets by the shaggy lion of a dean at a center. He is speaking more or less to these pages, smiling down. You are Harold and Gandenza, 18, date of secondary school graduation, approximately 1 month from now, attending the Enfield Tennis Academy, Enfield, Massachusetts, a boarding school where you reside. His reading glasses are rectangular, court-shaped, the sidelines at top and bottom. You are, according to Coach White and Dean, a regional, nationally, and continentally ranked junior tennis player, a potential ONNK athlete of substantial promise, recruited by Coach White via correspondence with Dr. Tavis here, commencing February of this year. The top page is removed and brought around neatly to the bottom of the sheaf at intervals. You have been in residence at the Enfield Tennis Academy since age 7. I am debating to risk scratching the right side of my jaw, where there is a wen. Coach White informs our offices that he holds the Enfield Tennis Academy's program and achievements in high regard, that the University of Arizona tennis squad has profited from the prior matriculation of several former ETA alumni, one of whom was Mr. Aubrey F.D. Lint, who appears also to be with you here today. Coach White and his staff have given us. The yellow administrator's usage is, on the whole, undistinguished, though I have to admit he's made himself understood. The director of composition seems to have more than the normal number of eyebrows. The dean at right is looking at my face a bit strangely. Uncle Charles is saying that though he can anticipate that the deans might be predisposed to weigh what he avers as coming from his possible appearance, as a kind of cheerleader for ETA, he can assure the assembled deans that all this is true, and that the Academy has presently in residence no fewer than a third of the continent's top 30 juniors in age brackets across the board, and that here I, who go by Hal, am right there among the very cream. Right and center Dean smiled professionally. The heads of DeLint and the coach incline as the dean at left clears his throat. Believe that you could very well, even as a freshman, make a real contribution to this university's varsity tennis program. We are pleased, he either says or reads, removing a page. The competition of some major sort here has brought you down and given us the chance to sit down and chat together about your application and potential recruitment and matriculation and scholarship. I've been asked to add that Hal here is seated third, boys 18 and under singles, in the prestigious Whataburger Southwest Junior Invitational, out at the Rudolph Tennis Center. Says what I infer is the athletic affairs, his cocked head showing a freckled scalp. Out at Rudolph Park, near the outstanding El Con Marriott, CD inserts, a venue the whole contingent's been vocal about finding absolutely top hole thus far, which, just so, Chuck, and that according to Chuck here, Hal has already justified his seed, reaching the semifinals as of this morning's apparently impressive win, and that he'll be playing out at the center again tomorrow, against the winner of a quarter-final game tonight, and so we'll be playing tomorrow, and I believe scheduled for 8:30. Try to get underway before the gosh-awful heat out there, though of course a dry heat, and has apparently already qualified for this winter's continental indoors up in Edmonton, Kirk tells me, cocking further to look up and left at the varsity coach, whose smile teeth are radiant against a violent sunburn. Which is something indeed, he smiles, looking at me. Do we get all that right, Hal? CD has crossed his arms casually. Their triceps flesh is webbed with mottled, air-conditioned sunlight. You sure did, Bill, he smiles. Two halves of his mustache never quite match. And let me say, if I may, that Hal's excited. Excited to be invited for the third year running to the Invitational again. To be back here in a community he has real affection for. To visit with your alumni and coaching staff. To have already justified his high seed in this week's not unstiff competition. To, as they say, be in it without the fat woman in the Viking hat having sung, so to speak. But of course, most of all, to have a chance to meet you, gentlemen, and have a look at the facilities here. Everything here is absolutely top slot from what he's seen. There's a silence. DeLint shifts his back against the room's paneling and recenters his weight. My uncle beams and straightens a straight watch band. 62.5% of the room's faces are directed my way. Pleasantly expectant. My chest bumps like a dryer with shoes in it. I compose what I project will be seen as a smile. I turn this way in that slightly sort of directing expression to everyone in the room. There is a new silence. The yellow dean's eyebrows go circumflex. The two other deans look to the director of composition. The tennis coach has moved to stand at the broad window, feeling at the back of his crew cut. Uncle Charles strokes the forearm above his watch. Sharp curved palm shadows move slightly over the pine table's shine. The one head shadow of black moon. Is Hal all right, Chuck? Athletic Affairs asks. Hal just seemed to, grimace. Is he in pain? Are you in pain, son? Hal's right as rain, smiles my uncle, soothing the air with a casual hand. Just a bit of a, let's call it maybe a facial tic. Slightly add all the adrenaline of being here on your impressive campus. Justifying his seed so far without dropping a set. Receiving that official written offer of not only waivers, but a living allowance from Coach White here on Pac-10 letterhead, being ready in all probability to sign a national letter of intent right here and now this very day. He's indicated to me. CT looks to me, his look horribly mild. I do the safe thing, relaxing every muscle in my face, emptying out all expression. I stare carefully into the Keklu and nod of the middle dean's necktie. My silent response to the expectant silence begins to affect the air of the room. The bits of dust and sport coat lint stirred around my AC's vents, dancing jaggedly into the slant plane of window light, the air over the table like the sparkling space just above a freshly poured seltzer. The coach, in a slight accent neither British nor Australian, is telling CT that the whole application surface process, while usually just a pleasant formality, is probably best accentuated by letting the applicant speak up for himself. Right and center, deans have inclined together in a soft conference, forming a kind of TP of skin and hair. I presume it's probably to facilitate that the tennis coach mistook for accentuate, though accelerate, while clunkier than facilitate, is, from a phonetic perspective, more sensible. As a mistake, the dean with the flat yellow face has leaned forward, his lips drawn back from his teeth, and what I see is concern. His hands come together on the conference table surface, his own fingers looking like they mate as my own 4X series dissolves, and I hold tight to the sides of my chair. We need candidly to chat potential problems with my application. They and I, he is beginning to say, makes a reference to candor and its value. The issues my office faces with the application material on file from you, Hal, involves some test scores. He glances down at a colorful sheet of standardized scores in the trench his arms have made. The admissions staff is looking at standardized test scores from you that are, as I'm sure you know and can explain, are, shall we say, subnormal. I'm to explain, it's clear, that this really pretty sincere yellow dean at left admissions, and surely the little variant figure at Rises Athletics, and because the facial creases of the shaggy middle dean are now pursed in a kind of distance front, and I'm eating something that makes me really appreciate the presence of what I'm drinking right along with it, a look that spells professionally academic reservations, an uncomplicated loyalty to standards. Then at my center, my uncle looks to athletics as if puzzled. He shifts slightly in his chair. The incongruity between admissions hands and face color is almost wild. Verbal scores that are just quite a bit closer to zero than we're comfortable with. As against a secondary school transcript, the institution where both your mother and her brother are administrators, reading directly out of the sheaf inside his arm lips. And this past year, yes, has fallen off a bit, but by the word I mean fallen off to outstanding from 3 previous years of frankly incredible. Off the charts. Most institutions do not even have grades of A with multiple pluses after it, says the director of composition, his expression impossible to interpret. This kind of, how shall I put it, incongruity, admission says, his expression frank and concerned, I've got to tell you, sends up a red flag of potential concern during the admissions process. We thus invite you to explain the appearance of incongruity, if not outright shenanigans. Students has a tiny piping voice that's absurd coming out of a face this big. Surely by incredible you mean very, very impressive as opposed to literally, quote, incredible, surely, says CT, seeming to watch the coach at the window, massaging the back of his neck. The huge window gives out on nothing more than dazzling sunlight and cracked earth, with heat shimmers over it. Then there is before us the matter of not to require 2 but 9 separate application essays, some of which are nearly monograph length, each without exception being different sheet. The adjective various evaluators used was, quote, stellar, director of composition. I made in my assessment deliberate use of lapidary and effete, but in areas and with titles I'm sure you recall quite well how. Neoclassical assumptions in contemporary prescriptive grammar, the implications of post-war transformations for a holographic mimetic cinema, the emergence of heroic stasis in broadcast entertainment, Montag grammar, and the semantics of physical modality? A man who began to suspect he was made of glass? Tertiary symbolism in Justinian erotica? Now, showing broad expanses of recessed gum, suffice to say that there's some frank and candid concern about the recipient of these unfortunate test scores, though perhaps explainable test scores, being these essays' sole individual author. I'm not sure Hal's sure just what's being implied here, my uncle says, the dean at centers, fingering his labels as he interprets distasteful computed data. What the university is saying here is that from a strictly academic point of view, there are admission problems that Hal needs to try to help us iron out. A matriculant's first role at the university is and must be as a student. We couldn't admit a student we have reason to suspect can't cut the mustard, no matter how much of an asset he might be on the field. Dean Sawyer means the court, of course, Chuck, Athletic Affairs says. Head severely cocked, so he's including his white person behind him in the address, somehow. Not to mention ONNK regulations and investigators always snuffling around for some sort of whiff of the smell of impropriety. The varsity tennis coach looks at his own watch. Assuming these board scores are accurate reflections of true capacity, in this case, Academic Affairs says, his high voice serious and Sato, still looking at the file before him as if it were a plate of something bad. To tell you right now, my opinion is it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be fair to the other applicants, wouldn't be fair to the university's community. He looks at me. And it'd be especially unfair to Hal himself. Admitting a boy we see as simply an athletic asset would amount to just using that boy. We're under myriad scrutiny to make sure we're not using anybody. Your board results, son, indicate that we could be accused of using you. Uncle Charles is asking Coach White to ask the Dean of Athletic Affairs whether the weather over scores would be as heavy if I were, say, a revenue-raising football prodigy. The familiar panic at feeling misperceived is rising. My chest bumps and thuds. I expend energy on remaining utterly silent in my chair, empty, my eyes two great pale zeros. People have promised to get me through this, Uncle C.T., though. Has the pinched look of the cornered. His voice takes on an odd timbre when he's cornered, as if he were shouting as he receded. Howl's grades at ETA, which I should stress at Academy, not simply a capper factory, accredited by both the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the North American Sports Academy Association. It's focused on the total needs of the player and student, founded by a towering intellectual figure whom I hardly need name here, and based him on the rigorous Oxbridge Quadrivium Trivium circular model. A school fully staffed and equipped by a fully certified staff should show that my nephew here can cut just about any Pac-10 mustard that needs cutting, and that Dylan is moving toward the tennis coach, who is shaking his head. Would be able to see a distinct flavor of minor sport prejudice about this whole thing, C.T. says, crossing and recrossing his legs. As I listen, composed and staring, the room's carbonated silence is now hostile. I think it's time to let the actual applicant speak himself out on his own behalf, Academic Affairs says very quietly. This seems somehow impossible with you here, sir. Athletic smiles tiredly under a hand that massages the bridge of his nose. Maybe you'd excuse us for a moment and wait outside, Chuck. Coach White could accompany Mr. Tavis and his associate out to reception, the yellow dean says, smiling into my unfocused eyes. Led to believe this had all been ironed out in advance, from the C.T. is saying as he and Dylan are shown to the door. The tennis coach extends a hypertrophied arm. Athletics says, "We're all friends and colleagues here. This is not working out. It strikes me that exit signs would look to a native speaker of Latin like red-lit signs that say, 'He leaves.' I would yield to the urge to bolt for the door ahead of them if I could know what that bolting for the door is what the men in this room would see. Delint is murmuring something to the tennis coach. Sounds of keyboards, phone consoles as the doors briefly opened, then firmly shut. I am alone among administrative heads. Offense intended to anyone, Athletic Affairs is saying. His sport coat tan and his necktie insigniated in tiny print, beyond just physical abilities out there in play, which, believe me, we respect, want, believe me. Question about it, we wouldn't be so anxious to chat with you directly. See? That we've known and processing several prior applications through Coach White's office that the Enfield School is operated. However, impressively, by close relations of first-year brother who I can still remember the way White's predecessor Murray Clampkin wooed that kid so the grades objectivity can be all too easily called into question. By whomsoever's calling, NAAUP ill-willed Pac-10 programs, Onika. The essays are old ones, yes, but they are mine, Des Moines. But they are, yes, old not quite on the application instructed subject of most meaningful education experience ever. If I'd done you one from the last year, it would look to you like some sort of infant's random stabs on a keyboard, and to you, who use whomsoever as a subject, in this new smaller company, the director of composition seems abruptly to have emerged as both the alpha of the pack here and a way more effeminate than he'd seem at first, standing hip-shot with a hand on his waist, walking with a roll to his shoulders, jingling change as he pulls up his pants as he slides into the chair, still warm from CT's bottom, crossing his legs in a way that inclines him well into my personal space, so that I can see multiple eyebrow ticks and capillary webs in the oysters below his eyes, a small fabric softener and the remains of a breath mint turned sour. A bright, solid, but very shy boy. We know about you being very shy. Kirk White's told us about your athletically built, if rather standoffish, younger instructor told him. The director says softly, cupping what I feel to be a hand over my sports coat's bicep. Surely not. Who simply needs to swallow hard and trust and tell his side of the story to these gentlemen who bear no maliciousness, none at all, but are doing our jobs and trying to look out for everyone's interests at the same time. I can picture Delint and White sitting with their elbows on their knees in the defecatory posture of all athletes at rest. Delint staring at his huge thumbs while CT in the reception area paces in a tight ellipse, speaking into his portable phone. I have been coached for this like a dawn before a RICO hearing. A neutral and affectionless silence, the sort of defense Game Schmidt used to have me play. The best defense, let everything bounce off you. Do nothing. I tell you all you want, and more if the sounds I made could be what you hear. Athletics with his head out from under his wing. To avoid admissions procedures that could be seen as primarily athletics-oriented. It could be a mess, son. Bill means the appearance, not necessarily the real, true facts of the matter, which you alone can fill in, says the director of composition. The appearance of the high athletic ranking, the subnormal scores, the over-academic essays, the incredible grades, vortexing out what could be seen as a nepotistic situation. The Eldine has leaned so far forward that his tie is going to have a horizontal dent from the table edge. His face sallow and kindly and in a oh-whatever look. Here, Mr. Incandenza, Hal, please just explain to me why we couldn't be accused of using you, son. Why nobody could come and say to us, why, look here, University of Arizona, here you are, using a boy for just his body. So shy, withdrawn, he won't speak up for himself. A jock with doctored marks and a store-bought application. The Brewster's angle light of the tabletop, appears as a rose flush behind my closed lids. I cannot make myself understood, and I am not just a jock, I say slowly, distinctly. My transcript for the last year might have been diggied a bit, maybe, but what was to get me over a rough spot? The grades prior to that are Des Moines. My eyes are closed. The room is silent. I cannot make myself understood now. I'm speaking slowly and distinctly. Call it something I ate. And that's the end of chapter 1.